Okay, this is my review of the movie Factotum, which was released in 2006. Now, before I get onto the movie, I want to spend a short period of time talking about the man that the movie is about. And this is a real person, and his name was Charles Bukowski. For those of you who don't know him, he was a German-born American poet, novelist and short story writer who was very famous from the 40s onwards. His writing was influenced by social, cultural and economic ambience in his home city of Los Angeles. His work addressed the ordinary lives of poor Americans, the act of writing, alcohol, relationships with women and the drudgery of work. Bukowski wrote thousands of poems, hundreds of short stories and 6 novels, publishing over 60 books. Interestingly, the FBI also kept a file on him, and this was as a result of a column that he wrote, Notes of a Dirty Old Man, he wrote that for the LA underground newspaper Open City, which was a left-wing editorial. Now, another magazine called Bukowski, Time, called Bukowski a laureate of American lowlife. Regarding Bukowski's enduring popular appeal, he combines the confessional poet's promise of intimacy with the larger-than-life aplomb of a pulp fiction hero. Bukowski enjoyed extraordinary fame in Europe, especially in Germany, the place of his birth. Hank Chinaski, the subject of this movie, is the literary alter ego of the American writer Bukowski, appearing in 5 of his novels, a number of his short stories and poems. And although much of Chinaski's biography is based on Bukowski's own life story, the Chinaski character is still a literary creation that is constructed within the veneer of what the writer Adam Kirsch calls a pulp fiction hero. So, to Factotum, as a piece of dramatic biography. Chinaski, initially it was a book. Chinaski, played by Matt Dillon, is Bukowski's fictional alter ego who, like its author, is a hard-drinking writer, slumming away at odd jobs, staying in hole-in-the-wall apartments, while he scrawls away at poems and stories every chance he gets. The film illustrates the lifestyle accurately. Factotum was Bukowski's second novel and is set in the 40s in LA. Although consistently rejected by publishing houses, Chinaski continued to write while trying to get work to get by with. The film follows Chinaski as he works at and gets fired from various jobs, which include cleaning a massive sculpture, delivering ice, working at a pickle factory, and in a bicycle shop. While he seeks out work, he meets up with some assorted, eccentric and frequently alcoholic characters. Chinaski meets 2 women in the movie, both in bars. First, Jan, who becomes his most consistent companion throughout the film. Jan, played by Lily Taylor, like Chinaski, is an alcoholic. He moves in and becomes her lover and drinking partner. They coexist comfortably in languid squalor until Chinaski becomes upset after an altercation where he beats a wealthy man at the racetrack who refuses to give up his seat. Initially polite, Chinaski assaults the man after Jan challenges his behaviour. Soon after, Chinaski leaves Jan. Inevitably, Hank ends up in a bar and meets Laura, played by Marisa Tomei. She easily persuades Hank to return for beverage and extracurricular activities. And then the following day they meet Pierre, a sugar daddy type that Laura indulges in when she wants a binge and some extra cash. But Hank and her don't last long, and soon Hank is homeless and almost destitute. He re-engages with Jan, who's working as a chambermaid, but their relationship has effectively reached the end and after another job is interrupted by another extended bar visit, we effectively ride back at the start. I'd like to reveal some scenes that impacted me. I want to continue to do this with my movie reviews because it's very easy to get to the end of a movie and think, yeah, I like that, but what did I really like? So this is a sort of like bullet points, really. I was impressed by the start. It features the first firing of Hank after he's given a delivery of stock to deal with in a van, and after delivering it, there just happens to be a bar next to the depot. He ends up in it, of course, and a little later the employer, chasing up on his failure to deliver the second item, finds him in the bar and delivers the sack on the spot. So we are jettisoned into the world of Chinaski right from the off. Next up is a new job application. He wants to be a taxi driver, but the employer has checked out his details and finds that he has two DUI convictions and a host of other driving offences. So that plan halts before it gets started. It's a very amusing scene, one of many throughout the movie. And then Hank, he handles the disappointment with calmness, usually drowning any sorrow with a quick drink. We also get an occasional narrative from Hank, which he dips into quotes from Bukowski's written word. An early one that I recalled was when he was talking about writing. There's only one judge of a writer, and that is yourself. If you become affected by critics and others, you lose the ability to be an honest writer. I thought very poignant. Anyway, after he meets Jan, it soon becomes a marriage in heaven. A large jug of wine is positioned neatly between them on their first meeting. One crazy scene happens when Jan, who's moved in with Hank now, or is it Hank's moved into Jan? I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, Jan asks Hank what the time is. Unfortunately, the clock that they have manages to gain 35 minutes every hour. And so Hank then gets into some complex mental arithmetic using his mathematical skills to try and work out what the real time is now. It's a completely absurd situation. And it's a sound of how their relationship works so well, even when it's out of step with everybody else. Later, another crazy conversation involving Hank and a work colleague. They become involved in going to the races and have a scam going. Anyway, as they return with their winnings in hand, a conversation develops about women. And the friend says, if you want to gamble and fuck, they, meaning women, get Marty. Or if you want to gamble and drink, again, they get Marty. Hank responds by saying, well, why don't you find a woman that gambles, drinks and fucks? Of course, really referring to Jan. But his friend responds and suggests, who would want a woman like that? It was just so amusing, and I can laugh about it now. Hank's newfound wealth, however, courtesy really of a few lucky choices at the racetrack and a scam, as I've mentioned, turns rather sour with Jan, who prefers Hank destitute and roughly dressed, and they have a row. Jan leaves and ends up in the bar. Hank comes round about 10 minutes later in a rage, and a rare display of violence slaps her across the cheek and makes a speech to the bar patrons about who would want to listen to her, and that's a rare incidence really of Hank losing his cool, but it's worth noting that it did happen, and so we can move on. this portrayal of a drunk not being a violent type, I think is a very good image about Bukowski, in contrast to rather the stereotype view that we tend to have of males who have drink problems. And there's also an incident where the left-wing politics that was portrayed in Bukowski's work comes to the fore. He discusses the notion of gambling as an escape for the working classes away from the drudgery of selling their labour for a pittance. Struck me as very Marxist and of course very Bukowski-like. There's a touch of machoism at the racetrack when this rich type sits in seats reserved for Hank and Jan, but initially Hank doesn't take the bait. He avoids the confrontation, but when Jan pushes him privately, he then goes back and gives the guy a real pummeling. It's another issue that doesn't represent really the type of man that Hank is, and but it disturbs him to the extent that he walks out the following morning after another night of binging. But before he goes, he empties his pockets and hands Jan 50% of what he's got, which again reflects his character as a man who believes in equality and is not running around with a great ego. After that, he has this brief interest with Laura, who's another barfly. I won't refer again to that portion, but we do get a brief picture of family life, and I found this quite intriguing. Hank, who's now sort of homeless, effectively, and low on funds, visits his folks, mother and father, at their family home, and is warmly greeted by mother. However, father immediately starts to question his son about work, about the lack of it, about drinking, about his worthless ambition to be a writer. And Hank tries to deflect the criticism and suggests that they go for a few cocktails. And this tips the father over the edge, and his wrath is exposed, and he throws Hank literally out onto the yard. And it's a very poignant message, really, about where Hank has come from with regard to males and identifying with males. There's a very amusing sketch shortly after that, and this is after he reunites with Jan, finds her doing a chambermaid job, and they're soon reunited, even though the writing's on the wall. But he wakes up one morning and he's developed the crabs. Now, if you know anything about the crabs, this is when you've got lice in your pubic hair. He rushes to the pharmacist, who gives him the necessary creams, but advises strongly that he should only put the creams on for a certain amount of time, and then should shower it off. Unfortunately, he falls asleep, and in the morning he awakes to this sudden rush of pain, and he needs Jan to bail him out. She wraps him up in cotton wool, so to speak, to try and alleviate the tremendous rash and discomfort that he's feeling in his private area. It's quite hilarious, although I guess it probably isn't if you experience it. Another job, he's cleaning a statue of a Greek goddess, and the bar again interferes, and another firing. And this prompts a debate started by Jan about his need to claim for a half day's pay through the social security system. And this again brings a very interesting message to the movie about, although he's failing in many areas, he's still very much cued in to what his rights are, which again reflects on that left-wing politics. We also witness him going to a claims office, and he runs into a fellow wino in there, and the inevitable happens. They get thrown out before they're able to submit their claim. And we then march towards the finish, and we find Hank in a strip club, and unbeknown to him, he's just received a letter from a publishing house that showed a great interest in one of his works, and there is a hint that there's better days ahead, as he sort of slides into a chair looking at a scantily clad female with a beer on the side. It's probably only 10 o'clock in the morning because the establishment is completely empty. But this sums up the movie. It's the second time I've watched it, and I have to say I enjoyed it more this time around. His abnormal lifestyle, but he's able to collide into social situations and go with the flow and normalise them. This is one aspect to the movie that I find very nourishing. Another movie that I could recommend that was written by Bukowski and turned into a film is Barfly. This one stars Mickey Rourke as Chinaski. Well worth a look. Okay, so that's my review of Factotum.